Why don't I get into my section? And yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, as I said, Rose Red, it is from 2002. Feels, I can't believe there was a blockbuster in 2002. When did they stop? It always feels
That's
like pre 2000,
a
but I
great
guess
question.
not. In 2002, there was a blockbuster, and, child Gabe walked into one, left, and her world was changed. And it was, like I said, a mini series, which was pretty popular for Stephen King adaptations at the time, if you think about it, right? There's The Stand. There's a lot that were just like, these books are huge, so they would have to be miniseries in order to encapsulate it. But I think he just has a problem with writing things small. He has short stories, and they've been also made into full length films. But he even said it, like, it was really hard for him to scale it down and make it shootable. He was like, because he wants to add so much stuff in there, and he's like, "Oh, right,
Yeah.
someone's gonna have to watch this." But it was written by him, and it is about a three-part ghost story written for TV that unfolds in a sinister Seattle mansion known as Rose Red, where weird paranormal activities occur. Hoping to conjure up the abandoned house's spirits, a psychology professor and her team of gifted psychics move in for a weekend. Yeah, to kind of open this section with a supposedly Shirley Jackson quote. That's what they say in Rose Red, that it was Shirley Jackson. But I'm like, did you make that up? I need to find it. But apparently, she said some houses are born bad,
Oh.
which may be a line in The Haunting of Hill House. I haven't read it. I own it,
Hmm.
and I'm looking forward to reading it because I hear it's really great. Some history on the making of Rose Red, because I was like, while I was researching it, because no one, first of all, no one's talking about Rose Red, and that's a problem. Um, Secondly, because you can't watch it, no one can find it. What I found, like, the only thing people were talking about was the making of, mostly, and then a little bit about Winchester House. And so Stephen King and Steven Spielberg,
Hmm.
you guys remember them, still around doing stuff, were actually set to work together on a remake of The Haunting, which is based on The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. They're going to team up together, Dream Team Stevens, and they had some creative differences, as
Hmm.
as two very strong-minded, creative men are to do, with lots of power. So they didn't make their play in film, and instead they split ways. And so Spielberg made his own remake of The Haunting, while King made Rose Red.
Hmm.
And the film is still very clearly an homage to Jackson, because like there's a lot of similarities, which I'll definitely go through. But um, The Haunting of Hill House is about a team of investigators and psychics who go to a famous haunted house to either prove or discredit its status.
Hmm.
So both feature a special and secluded woman as our protagonist. There's a murderous house influenced by the real life Winchester house. There's an heir to the haunted property that attends as well, and subtle queer undertones for the
Hmm.
time in both. Whereas it's like, um, uh, I could see how people are like, they just like, you go to like a art history class and they're like, these are just two best gal friends in the painting, and they're like making out, and you're like, are you sure they're not lesbians? Like, no, just women were different at that time. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that there were very specific decisions made, like that, like, this is queer, okay? And we could fight about it, but yeah, there's in both pieces there are some queer undertones, because it's just inherent with, like, if you're going to kind of explore some of the things that Shirley Jackson was exploring, kind of comes up. You're looking for companionship, and sometimes that's the kind of companion you find. Another fun fact is that Stephen King had actually begun writing the screenplay, but was halted in the middle of it due to a car accident.
Hmm.
And we explained in our episode about Stephen King that he had been hit by a van and that he had nearly died, and that this incident changed him. Like, it resulted in him getting clean and like focusing on his life and writing and family. And it was just totally earth shattering for him. And he was kind of like
Mhm.
on this like fast lane to like, who knows where he would have been if this didn't happen, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Rose Red was the first thing he worked on after that incident, only months after recovering or like during recovery. And he actually had intended for this work to be one of his last projects, but I don't know if King will ever be able to stop writing or doing or be like, like, I don't think he'll ever chill.
Yeah.
You just can't. So I just thought that was pretty interesting that this is like one of the things he worked on. And it's so different from anything he's ever done after that.
Yeah.
It does have some homages to his other work. There are characters who have similar names or like last names. There's references. And then there's, even the characters can be compared to some other ones. So I'll talk about that as well. But here's some history about the House of Rose Red. So the whole thing is that there's a team of psychics, not a team, they're a ragtag group of psychics gathered together by this really passionate psychology professor who wants to open up this house. And so Rose Red was built in 1906 by a wealthy oilman named John Rimbauer for his wife, Ellen. And Rimbauer used much of his wealth to build the mansion on 40 acres of woodland in the heart of Seattle on the site of an indigenous burial ground, because that's how classic King works are. The
Yep.
house was rumored to be cursed. Yeah, there's a lot. There's going to be a lot. The house was rumored to be cursed the moment that it began being built. Construction workers died, business partners committed suicide, tour attendees went missing. Like, it is always just murdering or abducting. And Professor Reardon, who is the psychology professor who starts this, explains that the house treats men and women differently. While women end up missing in Rose Red, men end up dead. And given that Rose Red is Ellen's to its core, this misandrous approach to its guests makes sense. Ellen has good reason to not like men. She was married to a terrible one. So
Yeah.
actually, like, while traveling through Africa, a truly Lovecraftian tale of white people in Africa touching things they shouldn't, Ellen contracts an STD from her husband, which nearly kills her. He keeps up the behavior even when they return home, despite the impact it had on his wife. She is like on the deathbed.
Wow.
um, and he's just like, whatever. Ellen gives birth to two children, a son, Adam, for he is the first, and later a daughter born in April and named such. April is born with a withered arm, and that is most likely a result of Ellen's previous illness, and by extension, due to her father's infidelities, right?
Mm.
Ellen brings back with them Sukina, who is a woman from Africa that had helped nurse Ellen back to health, was the only person who cared for her. And Ellen and Sukina's relationship is never that of servant, estate owner, any like, she's not the help in that way. And at first there's Ellen refers to her as a friend, and later Ellen refers to her as a sister. Though
Mm.
I think the relationship seems more intimate than that, and in what they explain, just kind of like in the way that they treat each other and their reactions, the way they're colluding, just always felt a bit more intimate. And especially if Ellen is so neglected and alone, like just makes sense that you would find connection in that way. To the point where like there's spoilers, they work together to murder Ellen's husband, John. And
Nice.
when Sakina is brought in for questioning regarding April's disappearance, the daughter, Ellen is absolutely distraught. And it's not like yeah, you would be very upset with your friend, but she's like losing it.
Yeah.
And the relationship and its queer undertones reminds me a lot of Eleanor or Nell from The Haunting of Hill House, and Theodora or Theo, who is one of the occupants during that time. The two
Mhm.
women became friends, but in reading it and watching it on the screen, Nell's fascination and obsession with Theo can be understood as a sexual attraction and potentially love.
Yeah.
Again, coming from this loneliness and need for companionship that seems to evolve past like just friendship. There's like admiration, and it just goes to a different step, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Of course, it's not like solidified. All right. Again, my opinion. So there's this psychic exploration that happens in the film. So Dr. Reardon is a part of the psychology department and is intent on awakening the slumbering murderous estate, Rose Red. And to do that, she's assembled a colorful. Yeah, she keeps saying she wants to awaken it.
Like,
She says it's a dead
why?
cell because that's what she does. She's obsessed with Rose Red.
It's like it's a murder house. Why you want people to be murdered? I don't know.
Because then she's right. Then she's right. Because then
Sure.
psychic stuff works. I don't know.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So to awaken this dead cell, she has assembled a colorful group of psychics. They all vary in their abilities since we don't quite know what the house will find yummy enough to awaken. The team features what is called a touch know, played by Emily Deschanel, where she has the ability to see things when she touches someone. And she's also a psychic television show host, which
Oh,
is kind of fun. There's a precog, an older man who can see into the future. The insufferable Emery is a postcog with the ability to see the past, which is actually pretty helpful when we don't know who's died yet. He's
yeah.
like, that person's dead. I saw them and they're dead now. There's the automatic writer, and one of the guys like refers to her as a Ouija board, essentially, where spirits and people can use her to voice their thoughts. And there's also a telepath with remote viewing capabilities. So whole like span. Like I didn't know there was that many different
Kinds of
like.
psychics. Yeah.
Who knew? And then finally, there is a Carrie-esque Annie, who's a young girl with autism who is telekinetic, but also a sprinkle of other things. She is just special. Annie's character is pretty problematic as she is introduced as this special girl who, after being bit by a dog, exacts revenge upon the owners of said dog by summoning stones from the sky. She draws them as a coloring picture, and she's just this powerful and also not understanding her power. And so then she is also feared and she's essentially like villainized while also being like a hero. It's complicated. And I think the biggest thing is that as someone with autism, Annie isn't able to mask or control her powers in the way that others have learned to do. She doesn't tamper down her abilities. And so perhaps she's more raw or unfiltered, making her a larger battery for the psychic energy. But I wonder if we could have accomplished this same understanding if she was simply young and sheltered, like Carrie had been. Like,
Yeah.
maybe she just had an overbearing parent, like she does, right?
Mhm.
Without having to add the autism aspect. She's also not
Yeah.
played by an
Oop.
autistic.
I was trying to do this. It's been a
God.
minute. I was just gonna say, like, exactly. Like, it's basically that she is given this role, and it implies that like to mask is the better option. Like to
Mhm.
have that as an ability is the better option because it makes you more palatable or easier for society. So like, it's a rude take for
Yeah.
them to make.
Yeah. It's
Ultimately,
also like, it's clear that like Dr. Reardon is not in any way a good person. Like she's
yeah.
like we kind of know she's not a good person the whole time, but still her only value for Annie is really that she is special. And it's kind of like you're not like as someone who has autism, like you have to be special for us to care.
Yeah, that's
Like she
also a
has to
rude
have
take.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is just that's a problem that occurs a lot with autistic characters. It's a trope that comes up a lot. Like you have like Rain Man, right, or things like that, where it's just like
Mhm.
you have to be really good and really special at it. You can't just like need some extra help understanding social interaction. Like we can't have just like regular folks, right? They have to have this like some
Yeah, like
kind of magical
superhuman,
thing.
yeah, ability that like makes them worth paying attention to and not like demonizing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it like validates their existence, which
Mhm.
is
Well,
a
because in
problem.
America, everyone needs to have a purpose. Otherwise, why exist?
What are
Just
you doing here?
murder. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm following. I'm gonna
Yeah.
let you keep going though.
Thank you. But I absolutely agree. And in like when I was younger, of course, flew right over my head. Like I said, it's she's played by, I'm blanking on the actress's name, but it's Marnie from Halloween Town, which I was
Mhm.
like, that's who I saw. I was like, it's Marnie from Halloween Town. And I was like, oh, so interesting because she's playing differently. But I mean, people were doing that all the time. Like Leonardo DiCaprio also played someone who was differently abled at that time period. It just happens. Um, is before people were like, stop doing that, like as
Yeah.
vocally, you know?
Mhm.
Anyway, I do think that like if she were just young and still sheltered, like I think we could have gotten the same effect. Like she still would have been, you know, special in that way, like Carrie is. Like
Mhm.
Carrie does the same exact thing.
Mhm.
Instead, we get this differently abled trope, labeling her as special and therefore important. And even her haunting of Hill House counterpart Eleanor is also a special woman who activates the house, but she is not autistic, and she's just a like recluse who's also been sheltered. Like
Mhm.
like Shirley Jackson was able to establish that this is someone like she might even honestly be autistic without them understanding that she was autistic because she didn't understand social interactions. But it was never like she is this and that's why she's that.
Yeah,
You
it
know, it was
wasn't in
just
like
like
a demonizing way or infantilization way. Like there was a
no.
very much I have to take care of her in this she is not capable of doing so herself. And like it's one thing to say someone needs help versus to infantilize them. And I think that's the issue
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and it was always from the perspective of like she just doesn't know better because she was sheltered, and
Mhm.
this is her first time getting the opportunity to do something about it.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like everyone has to be a bit more patient. But with Annie, it wasn't like that. It was
Mhm.
like we all have to save her from. She's just living her life. Like she's
Yeah.
literally just like, I like music. I want to play music. Like, let me live
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah. Why you make me go to
Play
this
with her
house?
dolls,
Mhm.
whatever. Anyway, I want to go through the different deaths and disappearances in Rose Red. Thank you, Wikipedia, for listing them all out because it's like a PowerPoint presentation. And I was like, wait, who, what, how, what year? I'm very bad at time periods. But from 1906 to 1909, construction workers die on the site. There's a Teamster Harry Corbin who shoots a foreman and does not remember doing that. One worker is decapitated by falling glass, one choked on a piece of apple, one falls off scaffolding and breaks his neck.
Mm.
So, in the making of, it's messed up. March 13th, 1909, Rose Red claims its first victim to feed of their life force. Connie Fomanter vanishes while admiring a globe in the West Wing Library. She is never seen again, despite numerous searches. So, that's a woman, she disappears. Versus all the deaths, right? September 23rd, 1909, Laura, the housemaid, vanishes. May 21st, Delora vanishes. I don't even know who Delora is. It just says Delora. 1911 or 1912, not sure. Another housemaid, Gail, vanishes. Just absorbing ladies. John Rimauer, terrible man, fires his business partner, Douglas Posey, in November 1914. Um, they kind of brush it off saying like he just wanted all the money for himself and so he like
Mm.
dismissed him, but then the film insinuates that he was gay. It doesn't really, it's pretty much just says that he is gay, which could have also contributed to his firing. Otherwise, I don't understand why they went on this whole tirade about him being gay, because they just wanted to like make jokes about it. Like one guy goes, oh,
I
he
think
likes chaps in chaps
yeah.
because he was a cowboy. And then they were like, was he a wrangler or a brander? And like,
Oh
it's like all these,
god.
yeah, it's just all this like go like back and forth. And I was like, but what is the relevance? Like, are you, unless you're telling me that John fired him because he was gay, which is like, I get that because that
That
would be
happened then.
something the
Yeah.
jerk John would do. Otherwise, you're just poking fun for why.
Yeah.
Again, a little Stephen King for you. In 1915, as revenge, Douglas Posey hangs himself in a suicide in front of the Rimbauer children in the downstairs parlor. And soon after that, April stops talking and Adam is sent off to boarding school. So he got his revenge. February 17, 1917, Rose Red grows jealous of Ellen's relationship with her young daughter April, and the child vanishes in the kitchen, is never seen again. Over 50 people are looking through the house, and they take Sukina and accuse her of being the cause of this disappearance, and question her for her murder that they assume is a murder, and she loses like fingers and has a black eye and is
Oh
horribly
gosh.
abused because she's a black woman in 1917, and a little white girl went missing. In March 9th, 1918, John's drinking buddy George Meter dies from an allergic reaction to a bee sting in the solarium. Spoilers, in 1923, John is pushed from the tower by Ellen and Sukina, who make it look like a suicide. That one was not the house.
Yeah.
Just finally. January 15th, 1946. I'm going through all these so you can see how murderous this house is. Rose Red feels threatened by the glamorous movie star and good friend of Ellen, Deanna Petrie, and the woman vanishes in the billiards room during one of Ellen's yearly parties.
Did this also inspire the game Clue?
I like it does feel that way. Like she's in the billiards room with and she's like a movie star. That scene definitely feels like that. A little like Mrs. Peacock or Mrs. White or what have you. The only thing found of Deanna is one of her earrings, and after her disappearance, the parties are called off for good. And January 15th, 1950, Rose Red finally claims its most desired victim. Ellen herself vanishes while in the perspective hallway. There's like weird rooms. And last seen by a maid who wished her good evening. In 1960s, there's a team of scientists investigating Rose Red. They conclude that hauntings and screams are caused by water running through old drainage pipes. Sure. Head investigator Max Bernstein goes missing, never to be seen again. So that was just the drainage pipes. I don't know. 1972, Liza Albert vanishes after straying from her tour group and is never seen again. The only trace of her is her handbag ripped to bloody shreds. Historical tours of the house are permanently shut down for good. And so it dies. The house can no longer siphon energy and steal wandering women and murder men who probably deserved it. And so it becomes what Reardon refers to as a dead cell. When the people show up, are psychics, it gets reactivated. Like just the thought of them coming, it's like, yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Ready. I've been waiting to murder.
It starts eating people before they even arrive. It's like we have awakened our ghosts. They're walking around and they're gonna murder people. So present day deaths, the deaths that occur in this film, there's Kevin Bollinger, who's this pesky, disbelieving reporter who becomes trapped in the solarium where he is pulled off screen by an unseen force. He is throughout the film used to lure or harm other characters. He is just like this person who is there to prove that they're crazy, essentially, like the psychics. And he arrives early, and Sukina opens the door and is like, "We were waiting for you, sir." And he's like, "What? I didn't know there were people here yet." And she's like, "Right this way." And he's an idiot, so he does. There's Pam. The touch no is the first to go because she's pretty blonde. She is lured outside into the garden the first evening they're in the house. And again, men die and women go missing. So she's, as far as I know, not dead. She's just taken by the house. The villainous Dr. Miller and the overbearing Kay Waterman, who's the mother of Emery, end up at the estate and get into an accident. They're both there for different reasons. Miller is looking for Bollinger, who's gone, and Waterman is looking for her son, and they end up like lost and end up dead in different ways. This is 4 hours, okay?
That's a long movie.
Pam lures Vic, who is the precog, the older man, out to the pond where he believes he finds Pam's dead body. It's not, it's just like an illusion, but the panic results in a heart attack, and he actually tries to get help, but Emery thinks that he's just a figment of his imagination and so does not help and he dies.
Oh no.
It's super sad. And he's like, and that he did that like 3 times. There's people who are like, help me. Like he hears his own mom, like, Emery. And he's like, I can't hear you. Emery's the worst. He is the worst character and he survives. I don't know why. Nick and Kathy. So Nick is, I always forget what he is. He was one of the more boring psychics. Kathy was the writer.
Mm,
They head down a main hall after being attacked by Mrs. Waterman, and the house changes around them, so they end up being lost. And then there's this mysterious shape that's under the carpet and chases them, and they flee. And as the shape is like catching up, Nick puts Kathy into a closet, and then he is just taken.
mm.
Um, but Kathy is in there, and uh, this was a big scene for me when I was watching it as a young person because Kathy is religious. She's incredibly religious. And I was also incredibly religious at the time of watching this. And so while the monster is coming and she's hiding in that closet, she is praying and she has a rosary and it doesn't get her. It
Yeah.
like passed over her. And I was like, the power of Christ.
Wow.
It's like I'm safe. I can be safe as long as God is with me.
Don't fuck with me! I have the power of God and anime on my side! Wait,
And so it that helped me get through a lot of horror movies because I was like, I have Jesus. What
Yeah,
are
I'm gonna be
ghosts when you
fine.
have Jesus? He's the good ghost.
Yeah.
So my ghost is better than your ghost. And so she survives. And I was like, that's cool. The fact that she survived to the end, I was like, wow. Stephen, Emery, Kathy, Rachel, and Annie. Rachel is Annie's sister. She also goes by sister in the movie. Escape from Rose Red. But Joyce Reardon, the psychology professor, is insane and refuses to leave. Like she has snapped. And
Mm,
so they get out, and the house is like on fire. It's going crazy. And Joyce is in the house, and she realizes too late that she does actually want to leave, but she's now surrounded by the ghost of Rose Red. So it's Nick, Pam, Vic, Miss Waterman, Dr. Miller, Bollinger, Sukina, Ellen Rimbauer, and Deanna Petrie. And she screams in terror as the film fades to black. So those are all the deaths.
yeah. But
This is like the longest episode
so
ever.
many.
That's why I just wanted to explain all the deaths. So, just to show you how murderous this house is. Anyway, because she's a villain, like just leave like let it be.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to
Consequences.
exactly. I want to quickly go over some of the connections of Winchester House and The Haunting of Hill House with Rose Red. I won't do too much because Kat is going to talk about Winchester House. But I just wanted to point out some of the similarities a little bit. So, like Sarah Winchester, Ellen Rimbauer is compelled to never stop building her house. That's like the biggest thing is that the house is always being built. You can't rely on the maps or whatever of the house, the outline. I don't know what the technical term is, the layout, I guess, schematics of this house because it's always changing. It moves
Mhm.
around. It's unreliable. For Sarah Winchester, it's not unreliable. It's just that she kept going. For Sarah, she felt she was being haunted by those who died due to the guns her family made. That's one of the
Allegedly.
allegedly. It's one of the theories because her family or Winchesters, they make guns. And
Yeah.
she had also been told by a psychic, Ellen Rimbaugh had been told by a psychic to build her house. And so she created this house as a maze to distract the spirits, allegedly. Ellen, who was also told by a psychic that she would actually never die if the house was always being worked on. So
Mm.
she gets to live forever as long as the house lives forever. Both women, having too much money and time and paranoia, as well as lack of therapy, were able to create interesting architectural designs. So Sarah created some accessible features to cater to her arthritis, while Ellen made some interesting funhouse type features, such as an upside down room. So not quite as good. However, we do learn in the film that it was actually Sukina that had designed the perplexing halls. Like she did a lot of the
Mm.
cool rooms, which I was like, that's dope. She needs more screen time.
Yeah.
Anyway, I find the most interesting and eerie part of Rose Red is that the house itself is the villain. It is a perplexing architectural nightmare that feeds off the energies and lives of its inhabitants, and it plays with them, manipulating them and taking them when it pleases, like a cat toying with its prey. And the house is as much a character, unreliable and sinister as anyone else in here. And for all the folly of King and all the things I can complain about when it comes to his tropes and problematic things, I will say that King is always talented at writing environments as characters. Um, I can write an entire thesis on how Pennywise isn't the villain of it, but rather the whole town of Derry is. That is the
Mhm.
villain. And that's what he's trying to say, I think. For King, Rose Red is an extension of Ellen. Her illness, her loneliness, her pain made manifest in the walls. And in an attempt to trick and cast out her own negative spirits, Ellen too ends up lost in its walls. It eats her. And there's this line in the middle of the film because it's made for TV, so there's these like cut to black dramatic episode fades, and when we come
Yeah.
back on episode 3 or something, Ellen Rimbauer is saying this essentially over the scene, like the footage of the house, and she says, "A house is a place of shelter. It is the body we put on top of our bodies. As our bodies grow old, so do our houses. As our bodies may sicken, so do our houses. And what of madness? If mad people live within, doesn't this madness creep into the rooms and walls and corridors and very boards? Don't we sometimes sense that madness reaching out to us? Isn't that a large part of why we mean what we mean when we say a place is unquiet, festered up with spirits? We say haunted, but what we mean is that the house has gone insane." I was like, dang, Ellen. dang, Ellen.
Mhm.
So Jackson's novel too showcases the house as a villain, a mastermind of evil. Horror writer Sarah Lotz has said of the novel, "Is Eleanor the victim? Is she behind the haunting? Or is it all in her own mind? To me, the best haunted house narratives are never just about the dead. They're about the living and the psychological. In Hill House, the real horror comes from the tragedy that Eleanor thinks she is escaping her stultifying family situation, but can't escape her own mind." Um,
That's
and
real.
again, this is all just like, this is hurt. She was so hurt. Like, Ellen is all kinds of tangled up. The novel opens with a truly haunting passage about the house that is obviously what inspired Ellen to be saying the words that she did. And they say, "No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against the hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone." Um, Considering how Jackson felt about how she felt neglected by her husband, and we did a whole episode on Shirley Jackson and how really honestly sad her life was and how absolutely lonely and just secluded she was and just
Mhm.
misunderstood. You can kind of get into that mind space of where she was when she was writing Hill House, and she actually wrote her husband a letter that ended, "He once wrote me a letter telling me that I would never be lonely again. I think that was the first, the most dreadful lie you ever told me." So we can see how the loneliness she felt seeped into the pages of her book. And King, too, is skilled at writing loneliness and isolation as much as he is about making environments people.
Yeah.
Just think of the Shining. However, the level to which Rose Red is alive grows past that of Hill House. And even still, though Sarah had construction continue on the Winchester house until her death, Rose Red never stopped being built. And perhaps the house isn't haunted, but has indeed become insane.
Nice.
So yeah,
That's
that's what
good.
I had to say about it.
Nice.
Um, which is honestly, there's so much more to say, and there's just not enough like
There's a
People
4-hour
talking about
movie,
Rose
Gabe.
Red.
Yeah, it's a 4-hour
I
movie.
know. I
Lots to say
know.
about something so long.
And I was like, I wanted to talk about The Haunting of Hill House because it's also really great. I was like, I don't got time. I
Yeah,
don't got time.
it's a bunch of long. There's like a whole
Yes.
TV show that's hours. Many. Maybe even
Mhm.
longer than Hill House or Rose Red in retrospect of like however
Yeah,
long the
yeah.
show is. So,
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I was gonna do the book, but even still, it's
yeah,
like it's tough.
I got you.
So